Hello and welcome to the Midwest Motoring Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Pesaconis. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Mike Andreski. We've got a heck of a show for you guys today. I can't wait to really dig into the nitty-gritty of some pretty amazing colors for automotive. Now, I know that doesn't sound as exciting as it is, but we've got a lot. We did a ton of research on this one. We pulled in a bunch of articles from a bunch of different sites to kind of compile our knowledge into what we think is a great discussion on car colors of future and past. But we kind of wanted to get into a little bit of a disclaimer. And that disclaimer is that, look, I'm not a financial planner. I know nothing about finances. You should never take my advice when it comes to investments because I will never give it to you in terms of any particular way. But I'm not a financial planner. However, we are joined by somebody who technically has some licenses in that field. And we need to just make sure that you know that this is not a representation of recommendations for how you should invest money. We're talking about value and not as an investment, but in terms of just like sales data historically. Mike, is there anything you wanted to say on that, man?
Yeah, just basically this is not investment advice and it should not be deemed as such. So a little background on me, since you kind of know Matt works for Hagerty. I do work for a financial institution, so I am licensed. But this is not investment advice, nor have we done any of this research ourselves or promoting any such data points that we may have in the articles that we portray through this conversation.
Yeah, and we're just pulling information from these articles that we think are pertinent to the collector hobby, as well as interesting topics. Because when I first saw this article come out that we're going to start our conversation off with, it just was really kind of eye-opening on the whole collectible car fad, and it's not even a fad, that just collectible cars in general. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk about some pretty crazy colors and kind of some wild and crazy stories from all over. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how cars are collected. We're going to talk about, does a car's color matter in terms of collectability? We're going to talk a little bit about rare colors and some interesting statistics around the world. And then we're finally going to talk about one of probably the most crazy colors that I have seen as of late. It's came out in I think 2017 or so, limited edition. But just the company who made that color just went above and beyond. And we're going to pull from a bunch of different places. But this is going to be a great episode. I can't wait. But this is the Midwest Motoring Podcast, sponsored by Hagerty.
When we see a beautiful car pass by, we always seem to use a hand signal. The classic thumbs up, the point and shoot 6-gun finger, the hang loose thumb and pinky combo. If you've ever flashed one of those, now there's a car club for you. Introducing the Hagerty Drivers Club. With exclusive members-only events, insight on buying and selling, the Hagerty Magazine, and roadside service, the Hagerty Drivers Club gives you a big thumbs up. So keep flashing those fingers.
Same to you!
Just not that one. Join the Hagerty Drivers Club at Hagerty.com today.
All right, Mike. So I'm so glad that Hagerty's still sponsoring us, because we have some pretty crazy stuff from their media site. So this first one comes from, it's actually a Hagerty Insider article. So if you're interested, go join the Hagerty Drivers Club so you too can be a Hagerty Insider and get some of this information. But the article is by John Wiley, and the article's title is, Does the Color of Your Car Really Impact Value? And so they kind of went on a journey, okay? So Hagerty's valuation team, we pull a lot of our value based on peer-to-peer sales. So we do have auction data, we do have dealership data when they supply it, but a lot of this has to do with peer-to-peer sales. And what that means is when we're insuring somebody and they say, hey, by the way, I need you to remove one of my cars, I sold it. We don't always get the information, but we always ask, hey, how much did you sell that car for? And when the client does divulge that information, obviously we keep it always secretive, and we don't
confidential.
Confidential. We don't tell who sold that car, but we're interested in that value because that's how our valuation team really looks at the actual value of these cars and what they're trading hands for. The other side of it is that then they go to other kind of auction sites. So they go to Bring a Trailer, Cars and Bids, P-Car Market, all of the live auction houses, and we'll actually send people to watch how these cars are trading hands. So that's really where a lot of this data comes into, and then they're interpolating this and putting in color as a part of the part of that analysis, and that's where this article comes from. So John and the evaluation team really dug deep into our information for this. Specifically, they're going to be looking at, over the last, I think it was 3 years, the Porsche market. And Porsches have sold pretty darn well. So they took all the data they could and just kind of focused it on that.
A few things I want to add to that is not just Porsche selling well, but Porsche, I feel is one of the car companies that gives you the option of having so many unique colors. I know, going over this article, 77% of the cars sold in America are either white, black, silver, or gray.
That really means that 77% of us are just boring.
I wouldn't say boring. we just like, hey, you know what? I see this color a lot. I like it too. So let's get it. And honestly, some of these car colors do look good on certain cars. But
and that percentage was according
Porsches
to the
have a lot of unique colors to them. You know, your yellows,
Right.
your purples. Obviously, there's the specific color, purple or green or whatnot on these Porsches. And they did grab the data. I know you said the last couple of years. It was dating back from 2013. So not
Okay.
the super rare, air-cooled Porsches that we're talking about. It's going to be a little bit more of the modern.
Well, and this is the sales data since 2013, so not the model year. So it could include some of the rare air-cooled stuff, but it also could include some of the more recent stuff as well. So it's kind of a smattering of everything. But that 77% of cars sold in America that were white, black, gray, or silver comes from the chemical company BASF. So they're one of the companies that helps produce paints. I think that's a really interesting statistic, just to kind of knock it out of the park right away. Is like, look, a lot of these cars are going to be white, silver, or black, or gray. And that means when you're looking at cars, right, the odds of you finding one in those colors is quite high. But some of the data, I mean, we kind of want to talk about like how John went about this article, and he did it in a couple of interesting ways. And so the first question he asks is, does it impact value, right? Mike, I mean, did you see in there like the difference in values based on the colors? It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, they do have several of the colors, especially with like notating yellow. Kind of picked on it. It's a very bright color.
Oh, yeah.
That one did have a premium related to the sales of it. And on the flip side of that was green had more or less a negative and correlation with it.
Yeah.
So green cars didn't sell as high as a yellow Porsche would.
Now,
The $6,000 swing is quite large for just the regular color that you're picking on a car.
and like you're absolutely right. Porsche has for a long, long time had a paint to sample option that they could paint these cars basically in a lot of different colors. Now, you paid a premium for those types of cars, and you still do to this day. But these, there are outliers into all this stuff. But I think a lot of the data that John pulled shows the standard, maybe not even standard, but the common color options. For example, like the speed yellow, guard red, lapis blue, all those types of things. So those showed up quite a bit. And as Mike said, there was a $6,000 spread between the yellow cars that had sold and the green cars that had sold. And honestly, like as a fan of green cars, like I can't believe that not as many people like green cars, especially on a Porsche.
I wonder if that would be, I know this was in North America. I wonder if that would change over in Europe, where a lot more of their cars and a lot of their sports cars are typically the British Racing Green. I wonder if that has any correlation with the region for this scenario. And I know we don't see too many green cars in America, nor do we have that green racing heritage here.
Right.
A lot of our sports cars, if you think about it, red Ferraris, yellow Lamborghinis, those types of colors. So I wonder if that's why yellow has that premium with it, because of what we correlate it to, where green, I know British has a lot of good racing heritage, and I feel like that's the primary market where green cars come from.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point that they didn't really talk about it in this article, but like how does the national location impact your desirability of color? And I think we actually talk about that a little bit later in the podcast too, is like, hey, if depending on where you are, that might impact the color preferences that you have. Like, I'm sure in like the Asian cultures where pink is not necessarily an effeminate color, you see a lot more pink cars, than you would here in the United States. But then you also have population size, right? So in Europe, you have smaller populations than you do here in the United States. So you have to take that into consideration. The other thing that John had talked about in this article was sell-through rate. Okay, and what sell-through rate basically means is that when a car goes up for sale, a lot of times on these auction sites, they'll have a reserve, or they'll set a benchmark, basically like saying, hey, I want to get no less than this amount out of this car. And what that sometimes means is that they put a reserve on the car. So a lot of these cars will be sold and the auction will just start, and sometimes those numbers do not reach that threshold and hit the reserve. And that then means that they won't sell the car. Well, generally speaking, they'll give the option to the seller to be like, hey, do you want to communicate with the final bidder to see if you guys can work out a deal or if you can work out more? They want to see these cars sold. But sometimes you just don't see these cars.
Sometimes dogs are super excited about these car colors too, and they want to add their voice into our podcast.
Yeah, it's part of living at home sometimes with these dogs, but
you should quarantine them.
I try. Now she's running away from my wife. Okay. But yeah, so the sell-through rate, basically, like they'll make an agreement with the seller and see if they can finally sell that car, because the auction houses want those cars sold. Now, the buyers and sellers may not come to an agreement and that car doesn't sell. So the sell-through rate basically says, of the cars that were put up on auction, how many of them were actually sold? And so they looked at color, and what they found was kind of almost a flip, is that where yellow had a higher premium in terms of value, they actually sold less often.
They took longer to sell.
Correct. They sold less often, less frequently than blue and greens did. Actually, blue and silver held the highest sell-through rate compared to yellow. Now, we're talking about a couple percentages. So they were saying that blue and silver sold at a rate about 73% of the time, whereas yellow sold anywhere between 70 to about 69% of the time. Or 68 rather. And so like it doesn't seem like a huge spread, but I mean that's a significant data point to say like, hey, look, even though these cars are coming in at higher values, they're actually selling and leaving hand and going to another hand less often. So that's an interesting piece to extrapolate from there.
I'm kind of thinking about that too, is I wonder the rarities of like oranges and greens and a lot more of these cars that sell at a deficit compared to the premium. If people are looking at bringing a trailer, and as soon as a green one comes up, they're reaching out to get the details on it, set up a meet, where the yellow ones, they might not be as, I can't think of the words right now. My mind has escaped me too many times I've been woken up by my infant. But the yellow ones, they may have just, they have the premium with them. The individuals aren't really seeking for it.
I mean, I think you also hit on a big part too, Mike, is that like yellow is not your thing, right? Like a yellow car is, yeah. But when I was talking to you about like a yellow 911, you were like, well, I'm not a huge fan of yellow. It's not bad, but like that's not the color that I go out of my way for, right?
I did almost buy a yellow Colorado before I bought my red ones.
So you're a hypocrite is what you're saying. But I mean, the point being is that like there are people who absolutely like dislike some colors. And I'm not saying that you're an absolutist, but I'm saying like some people are like, no, I do not like, for example, you don't like red cars, right? I had a red car and I absolutely loved it. And you're like, not for me, right? Yeah. So it also could play into like how many people like the color yellow. Like I'm not a huge yellow fan. Like I've been in some houses with yellow walls and seen yellow cars and just not my thing, you know what I mean? But then I saw a yellow 911 and for whatever reason in my head, like it looked good. It looked a lot better than what yellow would normally look like in my mind. So it was weird that I could be like, no, yellow's not a good color. And then I look at it on a Porsche and I go, that's a pretty nice color. I like that. So I know that's not helping this conversation at all, but it's just an interesting point that like it's such a personal opinion, right? You're looking at these cars trying to extrapolate value, but it's so personal. Like sometimes you're going to like it, and sometimes more people are going to like that color, you know?
And obviously, it was my point, so I agree with what Matt's saying here. But there are colors that I think look a lot better on some cars than others. Like there might be a yellow that looks really good on a Porsche, but looks absolutely horrendous on, I can't think of another car. I'm going to throw a Ferrari out. Granted, a lot of Ferraris look good in yellow still.
Well, you should know, Michael, as a car fan, that the Porsche yellow and the Ferrari yellow are not even, no, I'm just kidding you.
Yes, I mean, there's differences on them, but there are some body lines that look better in different colors, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and, so like that sometimes, black cars look really good in certain colors or on certain cars, but they don't look good on the other cars because it hides some of their body lines. It hides some of the characteristics that the car has.
Black cars also look like they immediately have scratches all over them. But that's
as soon as you look at it, it's scratched. So there's a lot of things that go into a color, and one thing that's not really talked about a lot in this article too, that I kind of want to bring up now, I think it's kind of important, is the way that the paint's maintained too. Like if it's a yellow and it's the original yellow, and it wasn't taken very good care of, and it's kind
faded.
of like dulled and stuff. It's gone flat. It hasn't been detailed. It hasn't been like brought out. It's not shiny or lustrous. That may not be able to fetch you that same premium as that other yellow did, even though it's original. But again, it's how you took care of it and how it looks whenever you finally go up and see it. There's some of them that people with black cars, they're a deep black car,
right.
And it's like, wow, I lost myself looking at this because it's so intoxicating,
right.
Where other black cars are not so much like that.
You're also a big fan of detailing, Mike. You actually enjoy the cleaning and maintaining of a car. So for you, that deep, dark, depth of a color is important. And, a lot of times you're trying to bring that luster back to those colors. So I totally can see that in your eyes of like when you could like a color and when you can't in terms of like the quality. And that plays a lot of that plays a big role in how these cars look. We're going to touch on one car company and car specifically that has one of the most incredible colors of a car that I think I've ever seen. And it's just one color, but it's really not a color. So we'll get into that. That's a little bit of a hint, and we're a little teaser because we'll get into that one.
Stay tuned for the end of this podcast.
Stay tuned.
You got to get all the
you got to listen
of the
to
colors.
the end. Yeah, exactly. But interestingly enough, the article then also talks about sell-through rates on a couple other colors. So they actually saw the highest sell-through rate on orange-colored cars, which was the rarest color. But they also noted that those cars are also the most volatile. So they're all like the numbers are all over the board, but sometimes they have the highest highs, but they also sometimes have the lowest lows.
And I think that just goes with the amounts of the cars. I would say in orange. I don't really see that as an often color. I don't think a lot of people go out and look for oranges, but whenever they do, they're like, I finally found my orange car. This is my orange Porsche. I want it. Absolutely want to get it. So they buy it quick. They buy it at a premium. Where some other times it might not be, that person might not be shopping for that car that year.
Right.
It could be a down year for people who love oranges and think that car looks great in orange.
So the article and some of the illustrations in the article, I highly recommend you guys go to Hagerty.com to find this article because there's a lot of great infographics on here. One of the best infographics I have here talks about the Porsche models and the best-selling colors in those particular models. So, for example, sell-through rates on Boxsters from 97 to 04 was red. And I'm sorry, I don't know the particular names of these colors. They do have them later on, but I'm just going to kind of go over the basic color. The 1974 to 75 911 2.7 was a red color. The 97 to 04 Cayman, the best-selling color was blue. The 1999 to 2005 911, so that's the 996 variant. The best color sold was white. The 1984 to 1989 911 3.2, that was silver. The 1950 to 64 356, silver. Which I don't recall ever seeing that car in any other color, by the way. Like in my brain, they're always silver. So I'm very wrong on that. I know that there were a couple other colors, but like that's the image. Whenever I think of a 356, it's silver in my head. The 1978 to 95 928 was black. The 88 to 89 911 Turbo, so that's the 930, was sold in silver. The 1990 to 94 911, the 964, was yellow. The 83 to 89 944 was an orange color, orangish red. The 05 to 12 997 911 was lapis blue. The 94 to 98 993 was blue. And then the 64 to 73 911 was orange. And then finally we have the 11 to 16 911, and blue was the most sold color. So, I mean, it's all across the board, and it's an interesting thing to kind of keep track of. Now, the other nice thing that they put on this article is actually a color premium scale. So if you go through any of the 911 models that you want and say, I want a blue, green, red, whatever it is, they actually provided like an interactive link that you can go through and like click. For example, red, because I like red colors. There is a high premium for the Bahia red, and interestingly enough, a negative percentage premium for the India red. So, you can go through there and kind of fine tune that. That's kind of where the article ends, and as I read through it, John, obviously on a lot of the Hagerty media sites and on the Hagerty articles, they bring up comments. They welcome comments from fans. They welcome comments from anybody in the community. And one of the first comments was like, "Is it worth it? Like, what is the value of these colors?" And John was quick to say that, like, look, yes, color matters. But it's not just that the color matters to value, it's how it matters. That's really what this article is trying to show, is how color matters and how color matters across the spectrum of Porsche models. So, as much as people say, I want to know the value. I want to know is it resell red? Why do they say resell red? But I mean, this data actually shows that red has been losing favor amongst cars because people might be burnt out on the red, right? So they quickly wanted to diverge from why it matters and go to how it matters, right? And I think that was kind of a powerful thought of like, you got to use your brain and you got to think about it.
And I think this article too it's an investigation piece too, and as Matt was saying, this is with just Porsches. There's going to be a lot of different cars out there, a lot of collector cars that are going to dictate their own ecosystem of values, especially based off the colors that were available for them and whatnot. Some cars might not have had a certain color that had a premium for the 911s, or they had another rare color. And the year which the color was made, I know manufacturing new colors now is a lot simplistic compared to 30, 40 years ago, whenever it's like, hey, the easiest thing we're able to do is make this black and white.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The Model T,
Ford's old motto,
Henry Ford was,
they can have any color. Yeah, they can have any color they want as long as it's black.
Right.
Because that was cheap and easy for them.
Well, they had also invested in a particular paint color and a paint style and how to produce it. And so they had hundreds of gallons of this stuff. So it's just this. That's all you got. But you're right. It depends on the technology available at the time.
And then it's also going to dictate, depending on who wants to buy this car as well. There was an outlier for the sell-throughs on the yellow Porsche that said the high sell-through rate for the yellow was for the 964 is likely due to one collector selling well. So there could be some cars, and depending on the time when the collector decides to, hey, I'm going to unload these Porsches, I'm going to buy my investment island or whatnot, whatever the individual wants to do with it, and then just decide to unload all these yellow Porsches.
I'm going to move to my island.
And
I don't need a Porsche on an island. Well. Actually, I'd still want a Porsche on an island. You could have that Baja Porsche we talked about last week. But you're right.
Yeah, so he could keep a few of them still in his yacht or whatnot.
And maybe he did. Who knows? But you're absolutely right. So this data is based on peer-to-peer sales, hand-to-hand sales, and what's going on. And that could have meant, a very rare, very high-end Porsche, maybe a roof or something was sold. And that can sway this data, right? So you have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. You got to look at this stuff and do your own research into it. John did say, however, because somebody asked, he's like, what's the safe color? What is the good color I should buy? And he goes, look, I can't tell you what the color you should buy, but if you're looking for the safest color that you know is going to sell, that people are going to want, you got to look at that percentage from the BASF, that 77% of cars sold were white, black, silver, or gray. And he goes, there's a reason why we see a bunch of them. If you're looking for the, basically that middle of the bell curve, it's going to sell. It's going to sell okay. It's not going to light any houses on fire or anything. It's going to be white, silver, black, or gray. Which, interestingly enough, it's not just Hagerty that's been looking at this stuff, Mike. We actually came up with a couple other articles that we looked at. You found one from CarMax, the auto dealer, the used car dealership.
Yeah, so they found research from their own markets. Obviously, they just work in secondhand cars, used cars, as far as what sells more often. And it's very parallel to the colors that they had from the Hagerty.
Right. And now they
article.
specifically were looking at a shorter period of time. Obviously, the Hagerty article looked from like 2013 on. The CarMax stuff was from 2017, December of 2017 to November of 2018.
And then these were obviously any type of cars that they had. So it wasn't just Porsches. It could be anything from Hondas, Chevys, any type of convertibles, coupes, sedans, sports cars, etc., that they collected this data from. And interestingly enough, and it still correlates to the top 4 colors are black, white, gray, silver, based off of CarMax.
Really?
What?
I said, whoa, really?
Surprise, surprise. Based
My
off
mind
CarMax,
is blown.
22% of cars sold were black, 19% were white, 17% were gray, and then 14% were silver. And then it followed off to a little bit more of the unique colors. I'd say more of the common blue and red, one that actually has color to it outside of just lack thereof or some color. And then it goes to the unique colors like brown, gold, green, tan, and orange. So one of the, I'd say special models, or maybe they were like Porsches that the CarMax received in and sold.
They did an interesting separation of data where they actually pulled by the vehicle body style. So they had like SUV, crossover, van, truck, and all that. And so I pulled three of kind of my favorite, the ones that I'd be looking at. So first, that's convertibles, right? And in convertibles, 23.6% of them sold were black. So this is the most. This is the color that is sold the most, and the percentage, okay? Sports cars, 23.8% of them black. And surprisingly enough, trucks, 23.7% sold white. So that's an interesting spread.
I know a lot of people think about whenever you get a convertibles or sports cars, and it kind of piggybacking off this Porsche conversation, we're talking about like yellows and stuff too, is you generally think somebody with a convertible or sports car is like, hey, look at me now. I got this vibrant color. I got this bright color. I got this attractive color. Like, look, I got a convertible, windows down, tops off, my hair is blowing in the wind. And same with sports cars too. Like, oh, look at that nice like Mustango down the road, and it's a nice yellow or orange, something like that. But weirdly enough, people migrated to the top 4 colors with those. Trucks I do find interesting as well. I feel like I don't see that many trucks that are white, but I'm going to have to start taking a second look and see exactly how many I see on the road that are white.
Seriously, because it's one of those things. But I also, in that aspect and in the data set that CarMax is pulling from, they're probably also pulling from like fleet sales. I don't know if CarMax does a bunch of fleet sales, but think about all the like white panel vans and like big used trucks that are used for like road works and stuff like that. A lot of them start off as white,
which is a great segue for best-selling cars by color that CarMax had. And I found some of these pretty funny, and some of them are very true. Is 45, close to 46% of Cadillac Escalades are black. And I know Matt and I were talking about this a little off air, and I was like, I didn't think they made Cadillac Escalades in any other color outside of black. I think there might be like a white here and there, but
I mean, when I think of one, yeah, that's one of the colors is just black, big black Escalade, and that's I think because
you also get those confused with the Suburbans a little bit,
Tahoes and whatnot.
Yeah. And then with that as well as Subaru WRXs and STIs, they have the Subaru Blue, and 32% of those were blue. And then,
I mean, if you buy an STI or WRX in anything other than Subaru Blue, you're just it's the wrong decision, right? That's my personal preference, mostly because when I was growing up and I wanted my first car, I just remember seeing I think it was a 2004 STI in that blue color with the gold wheels. Just it worked. It worked for me.
With the I always like the Subaru icon on the side of it and that yellow.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
that Subaru blue with that yellow and the gold wheels. That always looks so good. And the last one too that I find interesting is what Matt was saying is the Ford Transit Connect, which is that white, pretty much
Like a panel van. It's a moving
panel
van.
van.
Yep.
54% of those were sold that were white, and I feel like again that's the only color that they have in those. I don't see too many other ones unless somebody has a custom design on it. But I feel like because those are fleet type vehicles, it's just quick spray on it, and then the individual who receives it, if they want to put their custom logos on it, or able to garner more attention for their advertising with different decals and stuff on it, or different paint colors, they're able to do so afterwards.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, CarMax's article did say that if you removed the standard colors, so the popular colors, the black, white, gray, and silver, the next most popular color is blue, followed closely by red. So, I mean, that plays into something. You know, I'm a fan of red, and if I bought a sports car, you know, there's one color, gray, that I absolutely, it was like a silver gray that I absolutely loved, and it was the Monsoon Gray by Audi. Oh, it was like a dark gunmetal gray with a great metallic flake in it, and it made the lines of that car look fantastic. Plus, it was a good gray color. I've seen a couple Porsches in a similar color. I don't know the name of it, but it just like it shows off lines so well. The light comes in, and that plays into an interesting part that. I know that I think was it PPG? Yeah, I think PPG talked a little bit about like metallic flake versus flat. And they kind of talked about how if you have some of those standard, the black, silver, gray, and white, honestly, there's even more dichotomy in them. Like of saying, hey, it's not just a white, right? You have metallic, you have pearl, you have flat, you have clear, you know, so they broke it down to that, and the top two for like white was pearlescent and metallic.
I do like a pearlescent white.
I do too.
I know my motorcycle was pearlescent white with red accents.
I'm very aware.
Yes, it was a beautiful bike. It still is. And they do look different depending on the vehicle it is. Well, I mean, they do look different compared to a white. You can tell and you can see it. And a lot of the flakes that we add into cars now, too, really make the color pop. Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. It came up out of nowhere. I couldn't hit the mute button fast enough.
Go on, zoom tight.
They do make the colors pop, and it does give it a little bit of an offset. So if you're like parked by another white car, that other white car might look a little bit, you know, like a dirty white, and yours might be like, hey, look, I'm super shiny and super nice looking.
I will say white kind of like, unless you're really got a dirty car, like a pearlescent white does hide like dust a little bit better than a standard white car. But silver is, if you're talking about the least maintenance, I think silver and gray probably have the least amount of maintenance in terms of washing a car and cleaning a car and all that.
I feel like they're right in the between. Like white is, I had a white car. It wasn't horrible to wash, and I couldn't really tell how dirty it was until I got a wash bucket and I swiped down it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely had a different shades of white. I guess a different like 50 shades of gray in my car too. So I definitely can tell, and I know black obviously is going to show everything, but silver and gray, you still get a little bit more of that. You get a step closer to the black, so you get black does look sharp when it's clean type of look, without having just like, oh, I got a white car.
Right. Well, and like I said, the color combination and the composites that are used in it, for example, like paints have basically four similar components, right? They're going to have the binder, the solvent, the filler, and the pigment. And those four things are what makes up all different paints. And the different materials used in those four sections are what dictates like price and, you know, luster and all that kind of stuff. So PPG brought out a interesting article that kind of, they went on a geographical tour. So not just looking at the particular model types, but they wanted to see like what's the most prevalent color in certain markets. So they did like North America, South America, Europe, and then I think they did Asia Pacific. So in North America, 23% of cars sold for according to PPG were white. In South America, it's a tie at 32% between white and silver. So think about that. In South America, 64% of cars sold are either white or silver. That's insane, right? Europe, 25% of their cars that they buy are white. And in Asia Pacific, 31% are white. So what gives? I mean, honestly, I don't know.
I don't know. That's like, wait, I'm being put on the spot pretty quickly.
Mike, answer the question. What gives?
That's a great question. I don't know. We're gonna have to do more market research on it. It follows the trend though, and I don't know why that we like white, silver, gray, and black as much as like why don't we like color in our life in our cars?
I mean, we really I think hit on a extreme point that I think we're kind of underselling is the fleet sales, right? So a lot of these companies, enterprise, rental car fleets, dealerships, big companies, right? They buy fleet vehicles in specific colors. Maybe white is just the easiest color to then add things to, right? So I really wish some of these data is pulled out like fleet sales and corporate sales and just went specifically to private sales. Now, I think Hagerty specifically kind of did because those vehicles, even though they could have been fleet Porsches, I don't know of any company that had fleet Porsches. These were peer-to-peer sales, and like of vintage cars. So they were existing cars and colors being sold from person to person. They weren't like a massive amount of cars, which might be why in those situations maybe black was more prevalent than white. But yeah, I really wish some of these data points took out the fleet vehicles because I think that might play into a lot of this. It's like, hey, an Astrovan, right? Or not the Astrovan, but the Mercedes Sprinter van, right? Maybe it's black or white. Those are your choices from a fleet perspective. So yeah, 50% is going to be one, 50% potentially be the other.
That's a question that I don't think we've asked each other yet. Would you not buy a car based on its color?
I mean, I do it all the time, right? You look at a car and you go, nah, not the color I want. Nah, not the color I want. Like right now I'm looking for a sporty car. And when I look at them, first thing I see is it a manual or automatic? And the second thing I'm looking at is color, right? So if the color is a horrible silver or a horrible black, like I don't want it because like we talked about earlier, blacks are going to be a difficult car to maintain. You can make a black car look amazing, but you're going to have to detail it. You're going to have to wash it constantly. You're going to have to then potentially ceramic coat it or coat it in a clear vinyl, right, to prevent further damage to it and bring that luster back so you have that deep black, right? And we didn't talk about like satins. Like, would you buy a satin colored car? One of the colors that I like has been pretty popular recently in a bunch of automakers is that like cement gray, like that it's not flat. It's like a creamy flat gray with a clear coat.
Yeah, the Tacoma TRDs, they have that cement gray for a couple of other models, and I know a few other cars too.
And I don't I liked one or two of them, and maybe I liked them on like some of the hypercars, but I don't get it. Like I saw a recent, I think it was a Kia K5 in that color, and I was just like, why? Why would you have like a flat, shiny gray? It blew my mind, but that's not my personal preference, right? Somebody else might look at it and go, damn, that looks good,
Now,
what about you, Mike? You asked me the question. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you asked me the question, would color ever prevent you from buying a car?
Now, that's interesting because I know we talked about me not liking red on cars, right? And I was out car shopping for my Colorado at the time, and there was a yellow one that actually is why I stopped at the dealership to look at the Colorado, is because it was yellow. Drove by it a few times, and I was like, I'm tired of my black Cadillac because everybody has a black Cadillac. And I just was looking for a truck, and I couldn't keep a car longer than a year.
Yeah, at that point in time, he was flipping them left and right. It was crazy. I couldn't keep up.
So, point being is, like when I got in the Colorado, it was a Colorado red, so it wasn't the actual like bright red.
Right.
And
it was kind of a maroon.
I didn't dislike it. Like it grew on me over time, and that was something like typically I wouldn't buy it for a certain color. And whenever I bought my Miata, it was green, and I never had a green car before. It was never really something that I would seek out. or want to have. And after I bought it, I just kind of loved it. I started to love the uniqueness of it. You don't see
Right.
very many British Racing Green cars around.
Until I
And
bought one.
after me.
Hey, I had one first. I had your
That one I
exact
knew you.
Miata first, and I told you should buy it. But I mean, that brings up a good point on the car, which is like there are the, and I don't even want to call them appliance cars. There are cars that people buy to get them from point A to point B in a certain way, or to use, right, like a pickup truck. And so you might, in those situations, look to performance, capabilities, comfort, and price even before you look at color, right? And your Colorado is a great example of that. And then you look at things like, the Miata, right? The Miata that you have is the 97 M, like the
Edition.
special edition, the M edition, right? And so that car, with all those options that you liked, was only sold in that color that year, right? You didn't have a choice. So we kind of went into that, that research on what Miata to buy. Is like, you like the flip up headlights, you like the wood, touches in the car, and you like the limited slip rear differential. Plus, you like the nicer engine, right? And so those options were in the M series, the M Special Edition. So you kind of were either between that one or a blue one, and the blue ones being slightly older Miatas.
Or the 95 purples.
Or the 95 purples, right? So, like, you also run into those special edition cars that have a special color that, like you mentioned, the TRD Pros. What was it? Last year they had that vivid blue. Oh, God,
There's
that was
like
such
Vivid Blue, Cement Grays. They have one every year. There's like the Army Green.
Army Green right now, yeah.
So there's a lot of ones that they may pigeonhole you with specific colors or options. Me personally, whenever I wouldn't be discouraged on the color of the car, as long as it's not something completely grotesque like a poop brown or something like that.
We looked at this. A lot of people bought
just
brown and gold in colors. Like, for example, I think it was CarMax was talking about the Malibus. The number one color on a Malibu is gold. Like, really?
You see a lot of them, and I'm like,
right.
I believe it. It's just I don't know why you would. I guess I would buy one if I was looking for a car and I was looking for a Malibu, and that's the car that I wanted, and I got a decent price for it. I could live with it. It's not going to be the car that I look back at whenever I park it every single time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting concept to think about, like, how do you look at cars? And like, so my car that I'm looking to try to buy is going to be a sporty car. It's going to be a fun car. It's going to be a sports car of some sort, right? And so in my mind, a sports car should have a bright, vivid color. It should be a, an excitement thing. It should be a, look at my car. Look how, like, awesome it looks. Look how bright it is.
Should be different.
It should bring joy to people. Like, that's what I want from the colors, to bring attention and bring joy. Whether it be because it's a silly color, or whether it be because it's a beautiful color, right? I just saw a 997 911 that was forest green, and I was this close. I was within inches of my phone to just pick up the phone and be like, I want it, I need it, because I liked the green color on those 911s. I think it looks deep, it's metallic. Plus, I like green cars. I think green, like you said with the Miata, Mike, you don't see many green cars, right? And sure, they don't sell well, but you will not see probably another one of those cars unless it's a very mass-produced car like a Miata, right? And then they did bring that color green, similar green, not the same, similar green out on later models of the Miata. So, like, you run into that aspect of it too. And honestly, I wanted to get away from the red cars. I've had a lot of red cars. I've also had a lot of silver cars. My Audi was silver. My wife's car is silver. And then my the Ford that I have is black. It's a silver, like a metallic black. So it's like, it's a cool color, but instantaneously I drive by the quarry near the house and it immediately looks horrible. So I hate those types of colors.
So there's a lot of options. Let's say options. There's a lot of reasons for different colors, and I don't know where we're going with this now. You probably just edit this out.
Oh no, we're leaving this in. This is in. I mean, the next thing I want to talk about is, we talk a lot about, like, resell red, and there are a lot of beliefs that certain colors are more ticketed than others, right? And so I've kind of seen some data supporting this, some data not, but this is just according to an article on cjponyparts.com. They kind of pulled a very small segment of the basically tickets in a certain period of time. They don't give the time frame, but basically their methodology was to take 924 speeding citations that were collected from 4 intersections in 2 counties in multiple states, and they basically put all the data together to come up with what kind of cars are most ticketed. And I've seen a bunch of these all over the internet, so take it with a grain of salt. I first want to talk about the models. So the most ticketed cars. According to them, the most ticketed car is a Mercedes-Benz SL class, so one of the SL convertibles. Apparently, the violations per 100,000 miles driven is about 404%. So quite a high amount there.
I wonder if this was the same guy just getting pulled over repeatedly going to and from work.
Son of a gun! I hate this cop. Why does he always pull me over? Well, sir, you're constantly doing 16 miles an hour over the speed limit. So apparently you're 400% more likely to get ticketed in one of these cars. The next car is a Toyota Camry Solara. So that was kind of the coupe-ish Camry. Really good-looking car. Apparently, you're 350% more likely to get a ticket in that car. And then lastly, and I kind of believe this one, is a Scion TC, another Toyota product. And you're about 340% more likely to get a ticket in that car. Weirdly enough, according to them, the top 3 is a convertible, a coupe, and a coupe. Interesting. Also, then the least ticketed vehicles was a Jaguar XJ. You're 89% likely to get a ticket. The Chevrolet Suburban, you're 84% likely to get a ticket. And then the last one is the Buick Park Avenue at 89%. Take that for what it's will. The other thing that they touched on was colors, right? And so we always hear red is the most pulled over color. And actually, much like we found out on all the colors that people are like to buy, white is actually the most ticketed color car. Red is shortly second thereafter, but it goes white, red, gray, and then silver. So I guess if you're not including white, silver, black, then yeah, red would be the most likely, according to them. Also, according to them, the 5 states with the most driving citations, Ohio is number 1, which I can't believe. I can't believe that. But we also don't have the most expensive tickets. The most expensive tickets are Virginia at $1,350. Plus, in Virginia, you're going to have to go to court, and you're going to have to get an attorney, and it's just going to be a pain in the butt. So don't speed in Virginia. Long story short, don't speed in Virginia.
Another interesting thing about the types of colors of the cars, they took in consideration the percent of total traffic citations and then also the percentage of the local population for that car color. So if you had a lot of white, 77% of the cars are either white, black, gray, or silver. So they took in consideration hey, out of the percentage of the population, white cars are still the most ticketed based off of the data.
They talk about another interesting data point, which is 2 million speeding citations were collected and studied in the state of Ohio. And then they broke it down into a couple categories. So first it was the gender. So male or female is how they categorized it. Of the 2 million, 1,200,000 of those were male, and 718,000 were female. So 62% of those cited for speeding were male, and 37% were female. Then they broke it down to
absolute sense. We are much more aggressive than females, generally speaking.
And I mean, and being in the insurance biz, that's why guys generally have higher insurance rates than girls. Then they talked about age, which this was kind of interesting. If you're 19 years old, they got about 74,000 tickets. 20-year-olds got 80,000 tickets, and 21 had 76,000. So 19, 20, 21. Apparently, when you're 20, you're going to get the more tickets. I don't know why that is, and why young kids are getting off squeaky clean. And Mike, do you know what the average speed for tickets was? How many miles over the speed limit, what the average would have been for the most tickets?
So for the most tickets, I mean,
starting
whenever
like
they're
we'll go
15
from
miles per hour.
go from 9 miles an hour to 16 miles an hour over the speed limit. Which one do you like? How fast do you think the most average ticket written was?
So the highest amount of tickets was 15 miles per hour
Yeah.
over the speed limit with 310,000 tickets. So
Well, you were supposed to guess, but you apparently cheated and looked at the number. That's fine. That's fine.
That's what we do. It's whenever we do research, we have the research data in front of us.
Well, that's
so I
what
can
you're
speak
supposed to
upon it.
do.
So that was all just the guess, was the mileage per hour, the amount
And then
of
you
tickets.
just
It was all
pulled
just
the
a
number
combination.
out of your thin air. I meant thin air. Not
Yep, I work out.
But yeah, so I wonder also how that correlates to like how tickets are viewed. And not saying that cops are lenient on this stuff, but like maybe if they pull you over and they go, you were going 16 over, and you're like, no, I was doing 10 over. They're like, I'm going to write you for 15. Like maybe 15 is like a certain threshold where they're like, you're still going to pay a big fine, but maybe you're not going to jail today. You know what I mean? So that maybe that would be why. Because honestly, it's between 14 miles an hour and 15 miles an hour are the most ticketed. 10 miles an hour over is like 7,000. 9 miles an hour over, there's only 8,000 tickets of 2 million tickets. If you're 9 miles an hour over the speed limit, only 8,000 tickets. You must have had to been a big butt to that police officer to get a ticket at 9 miles an hour over. Or you were doing 35, or what say, it'd be like 34 and a 25. Like,
Or it was a holiday.
or it was a holiday.
That's the other option too.
Yeah, or middle of the night on a holiday, and you were just being a complete jackhole to the cop. Be nice to police officers, especially in a traffic stop. That's like a really, like, I know cops aren't getting a really good rap right now. There are good cops out there. Just don't be a butt to cops, especially on a traffic stop, because they are always on high alert on that stuff. And like, if you just cooperate and are polite, a lot of times they're going to say, hey, slow it down, okay? And you go, oh, okay. And then they'll let you off. So just be nice. I know you're pissed because you're not going to be late, or you were late anyways, and now you're just even later, but that's on
And
you.
your wallet's a little lighter.
Yeah, but that's not the police officer's fault. That's your fault, right? Plan accordingly. Or just don't enjoy speed as much. I can't do the latter, but, you know, that's how it goes. So yeah, those were some interesting like topics on like what cars and colors were like most ticketed. I don't know if I 100% agree. I saw another article that said the Subaru BRZ and Toyota 86 / FRS were actually the most ticketed. And I think that was ticketed period, not like speeding ticket. And I think I believe that because I know that a lot of people slide those cars around. They drive them aggressively. They look aggressive. You know, and that's a big part of it is if your car looks like it's doing 1,000,000 miles an hour standing still, going fast, it's going to be even more attention. You know what I mean?
I think, too, it's going back to all right, you got your 19, 20, 21-year-olds. A lot of those cars are aimed a little bit more for that age group. So the cops will see that car like, okay, it's a sports car. Most likely it's got a younger driver in it. Let's pull them over and see what we got. And it's like, okay, I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe, hey, we need to teach this guy a lesson. Hey, he's speeding too much. He's mouthing back to me, et cetera, et cetera. We'll just kind of like, hey, this is going to be your life lesson. Hopefully this is going to save you your life down the road whenever you're 40, 50 years old, et cetera.
Yeah.
So there could be a little bit of that bias in it. And everybody's biased in their own sense, but a little bit of that stereotype of it's a young car, young guy driving. He's probably hooligan somewhere around the neighborhoods. And
I wonder, I mean, stereotypes happen for a reason. Not that they're good or bad, but they just like people come up with stereotypes. And so if you are a guy or gal with a Subaru BRZ or a FRS or a Type 86, and you put a bigger wing on it, you know, maybe a bigger exhaust, a louder exhaust, and you're putting, you know, screeching tires on there, and you're drifting and doing all that stuff, and you got a big handbrake, and you make it look like a drift car or like a track car. Odds are the perception is you're going fast, even if you're standing still, right? So they're just going to be paying more attention to it. That's why cars like my, you know, Audi A6, which was silver and 4 doors, even though I probably did more speed in that, more consistently sped in that car than I did in my GTO, I never got any attention. Like, it just... Now, granted, I wasn't doing 20 miles an hour over. I was doing like maybe 9 miles an hour over.
15.
But like, no, very frequently did I go
That's a
15.
joke.
Occasionally, I mean, I did hit some higher speeds that shall not be named, but
Numbered.
numbered,
Shall be
named,
numbered.
names and numbers, A's and B's and C's and 12s. Is just like, it's not. It doesn't look boy racer-ish. It doesn't look aggressive. Now, I like aggressive-looking cars. I love the fins and the louvers and the hood scoops and things like that. I'm just saying, like, if it looks like it's going to go fast when it sits still, it's probably when it goes, like, driving even 5 miles over the speed limit, it's going to look like it's going fast. So, but, I mean, so those were some interesting parts about colors and how the public interview, like sees them, buying preferences, sell-through rates. One of the things that the article that Hagerty brought up, I know we're spinning back to it, is they mentioned when it comes to insurance, we get asked a lot, does color matter for my insurance? The answer is no, it doesn't. The color of your car does not play into the premium of your policy. Now, your accident and like speeding history and tickets, that'll play into it, but it has nothing to do with the color of the car, right? But I mean, then if we're looking at like the CJ Pony Parts article, they're talking about like how color and the car model could impact your likelihood of getting a speeding ticket. If you get a speeding ticket, that will impact your insurance. But I digress. The last thing we wanted to talk about now, if you get a chance, check out Donut Media. They did a whole big thing on like why one paint that's silver costs so much more than another paint that's silver.
It's like $2,000 a gallon compared to
like $200 a gallon, right? And so they went into a big topic about like how and why paints are expensive, and they talked about like there's a couple different variations. So one, we're going to just talk about there's two separate types of paint. There's solvent based and then there's water based. Of those two, you basically have the same four components. You have the binder, you have the solvent, you have the filler, and you have the pigment, right? So binder is just what it makes it adhere to the
It binds it to the metal.
Yeah.
Sticks it to the metal.
Sticks it to the metal or to the plastic or to the polymer or to the carbon fiber or whatever it may be. Like it has to be able to stick to it. So that's what the binder does. The solvent is what helps keep it liquid. The filler basically gives it a base, gives the color something to stem from. So a lot of times it's almost like the primer, right? There's got to be something in there that the color is going to meld with. And then finally you have the pigment, which the pigment is basically the non-organic materials that add and make color, right? So when you're thinking about colors, there has to be a real world item, object, element, something that can be broken down and used to create color. So for example, reds a lot of times have to do with a certain type of clay, which has rust, iron ore in it, right? So like that's how you get that red color. Then they add a bunch of other things into it. But they were specifically like near the end of their episode, and this was a bumper to bumper by Donut Media. They talked about a specific color, and I watched a ton of videos on this, and the car brand actually had a ton of press conferences on this stuff. They talked about a special color called structural blue. Okay? Structural blue.
Wasn't this for Lexus?
Yeah, so Lexus was the manufacturer who produced this color, okay? And this kind of brings into light why certain colors from manufacturers of certain quality may have higher premiums for that color. So when you're looking at the color options, like I got white, black, gray, silver, red, yellow, tri-coat lava orange, and the tri-coat lava orange option is like $2,000 extra. There's a reason why. It's because the paint literally costs more. And sometimes those companies put processes and decades into developing these colors. So this color called structural blue is based on a living organism. It's based off of I think they called it the the American Morpho butterfly. Okay? When you look at this butterfly, if you Google what they look like, it's a gigantic butterfly with blue wings. But the real crazy thing about this color is that the wings themselves are not blue. So you may be asking like, well, how the heck is the wing blue, but it's not blue? It all has to do with light and the perception of light. So what color basically is, getting into a little bit of science, is when we see color, it's because the light rays and the ultraviolet lights hit the object, and the color being bounced back into our eyes are the colors that are not being absorbed by the material, okay? So normally speaking, like if you see a red car, it's because the red pigment of the light frequency, the wavelength, does not absorb into that material. It actually bounces off, and that's why our eyes pick that color up. And so the structural blue of this Morpho butterfly is actually the reaction between light and the little tiny lattice structure in its wings. And so what it does is it absorbs everything else but this vibrant blue. So, Mike, did you get a chance to look at this at all?
I did. It's a very nice blue, and the cool thing about this, I think it's one of the things that might be overlooked, or one of the cool features is that in the nighttime, in the dark, it still looks like parts of it are glowing.
Yeah, it looks almost iridescent, right? It's like glowing blue. And the reason that it does that is because Lexus actually spent 15 years developing this color. Like, think about that. They had to think about this color way, way, way back when and say, hey, we're going to develop it for 15 years until we can get it, correct.
Hey, Bob, we got a project for you. What's that? We're going to make a color blue.
I want you to make this car blue. Well, how long do I got? As long as you want. Oh, okay.
15 years.
15 years later. I've finally done it. Okay, you're fired, Bob. No! But
now make a red.
Now make a red. They actually do have a really cool red. It's called infrared. But so this blue color, basically, they had to create a way for they actually took and pursued the actual way that the blue of the Morpho butterfly is shown. So they didn't want to just create a similar color blue. What they wanted is that same effect where basically no light other than the blue light is bouncing back. There's no blue color on the car. It's this lattice structure basically absorbs all other light and reflects back 100% blue light. And so wherever you're looking, it's either going to have dark color where no light is reflecting back at your eye, or it's going to be this bright iridescent blue, right? And it like you said, it glows. And so the fact that they developed this for 15 years, there's 40 steps in the process of applying this paint. And what they had to do is they basically adhered these lattice structures to film, then they dried it, removed the lattice structures from the film, and then basically are allowing the lattice structures to be powdered and then filled into the car. It's just a mind-blowing process of painting this car. Much like pearlescent colors, I would hate to have that car hit or dinged or scratched, because you're probably getting a whole new paint job, because I highly doubt you can blend anywhere into that paint. And I looked very hard to see what the option cost for the structural blue. What I found is in North America, this was on the LC500, only from I think in 2017, there's only 100 examples of the structural blue edition LC500 in the United States. I think they only made 300 globally. So it's a very, very rare color. And photos do not do it justice, for sure.
What was the premium on it? Did you see?
I didn't see it, but I did see an estimate of a repaint was $20,000 for a touch-up repaint of a body part. So think about that, $20,000 to do a door or a hood. That's just insane.
That is not cheap. And with the advancements, as technology gets better and better, right? The crazy part is we never really look about it. I know we've been talking about this for a while now, that colors like white, silver, black, gray, they're the primary colors. But the technologies that are going into these colors to make them stronger and make them better as they improve their deeper colors, we don't really notice it, but I'm sure if we pull up a car from way back when and look at a white now compared to a white then, there's going to be a lot of differences in those, and a lot of the costs and the research goes into that. There are people at automotive companies that their job is just colors, to research the colors, to find out what people are going to want to buy, and then also
formulate it, yeah,
to be able to create those, to make them deep, strong colors.
That's got to be a really good sales pitch to be like, okay, heads of Lexus, I want to develop a blue. Okay, well, we have blues on available. What makes your blue so special? It doesn't have any blue in it.
It's not actually blue.
Just like mind's blown, right? And it's like, well, how long is it going to take you? Because we really want to put that on all of our cars. And he goes, no. This is going to take me about 15 years to do, and it'll be about $20,000 per car.
Or it starts off with, what's your budget? What's your budget?
What's your budget?
A couple million.
That sounds really good, Mike. I'd really like you to develop that blue. You sold me on it. How much do you think that's going to cost? $250 million.
And I need to staff at least about 200 people.
Plus scientists and biologists, and like just mind blown. But these companies are giving creatives that like that process, right? And I'm sure that that's probably a very expensive paint, and they're probably not doing many. Like, for example, I was just talking to a gentleman about a Koenigsegg, and he's like, yeah, they put diamond flake in the paint. Diamond flake. They ground up diamonds and put it into the paint. Like, that's just insane. So sometimes these special edition paints or these high-level paints, like, they're expensive for a reason. I mean, just look at the technology. We went from, like, lacquer paints to solvent-based paints, and now we're on water-based paints, which still have some solvents in them. But, like, the technology is advancing to be more consistent, to be easier repaired, easier blended. But at the same time, it's like, technology will proceed, and they will continue to develop new colors and new ways to apply paint to cars. I mean, just look at powder coating, right? It's a completely different process, really. Similar, but like you magnetize a piece of metal, and then it's the filings stick to the metal, and then you clear coat it. Like, that's just crazy. So there's so many different cool ways to think about paint and color. And I know that color is subjective. I'm colorblind, so like I have a deficiency in cones and rods to see greens and reds, right? And so I still like identify the colors, but they look differently to me, so they may not look the same to you. And so it's all perception, which is all personal. And I think, Mike, that kind of brings us, we've gone a little long, but this kind of brings us out to our closing thoughts. And I'd love you to lead us off on that.
And I wanted to say one more thing, too, is I know like a lot of us are talking about paints and a lot of the colors and the technologies that are going into it. One thing I'd like to bring up is wraps as well. I know they're a newer type of technology in a sense where you can go in for relatively cheap and put very unique colors on your car that will last for a while, and even have some
protective
healing type of protections where you get a scratch on it, take it back, you can heat it up, and you kind of merge it back together. It kind of bonds itself.
Well, they also have ways to do like we were talking about, like satin and flat colors. Like, you can take any color. Well, I don't know why I'm knocking my mic around. Not my friend Mike, my microphone. Ouch. Is that like you can satin coat a car and make like a vibrant metallic silver look, metallic flat silver. Like, it's so cool. So yeah, there's a ton of different things, and you can do this fairly inexpensive, and the films do protect the paint a little bit, right? So, and then there's ceramic coatings. There's a ton of different ways to protect the paints. And Mike, you'd know more about that since you're a big detailing guy.
But as we digress, so there are options that if you don't like the color brown that you got for a discounted car, you could always get a wrap on it, protect the paint, etc. As far as the types of colors where we started this podcast episode off, is my point of view on it is get what you enjoy, right? So if you're a car collector and you enjoy collecting those rare exotic colors and you want to pay those premiums for it, do so. If you're investing in those and that's your option, speak to somebody who's able to guide you further on those types of investments and give you details of, hey, the market's showing this, the market's showing that for this car color, etc. If it's something that you daily drive every single day and you don't really care about it, pick something that you might enjoy, that, silver, etc., etc. Point being, for my take on all of this, is get what you enjoy it, appreciate it for what it is. there are alternatives to go out there and modify it if you wish to. If you get bored
Right.
of this silver car and you want something unique, there's options for that are relatively inexpensive comparative to other options. So that's what I would say my
overarching review in your closing
overarching
thoughts.
review of this. It's again, I'm sleep deprived. I was up since like 1 o'clock this morning.
That's all right, man. We got to do with what we can. And I it's weird. I don't know. We didn't start off 2021 this way. We didn't make a resolution to agree with each other, but I do have to agree with Mike that when you have to look at the articles, and when you start thinking about value, and when you start thinking about investing your money and trying to make a purchase decision, right? The only advice I can give you, and this isn't financial advice, is that you should do, just like Mike said, is buy what makes you happy. Do it for you. And you know what? If you're one of the 77% that likes silver, gray, black, whatever, then you do you, man, or lady, or person. You do you, right? And the sheer fact of it is, and I believe in this wholeheartedly, and I believe it in a lot of different things, is that like just like I'm drinking whiskey right now. The whiskey that you like is the whiskey you have, the whiskey the way you want it, and that's good whiskey, right? It doesn't matter if you like the whiskey and you like the way you're drinking it, that's good whiskey. And the same thing goes with cars. It's like, hey, if you like that car, you like its performance, you like its color, you're going to love that car no matter what. Don't try to buy a car based off a feeling that, oh, I think a silver car is going to sell more frequently, but a yellow car potentially might sell for more money. Like, I mean, you could do you, man or lady, but from wholeheartedly, this is going to be something that you're investing time and energy into. Get something that you're going to love, and don't worry about what others are thinking, because probably you'd be surprised. Somebody out there is going to believe in you and believe in the same things that you do. I mean, Mike and I are agreeing for once in a while. Like, it'll happen. And so the best thing I can say is don't really take it into consideration as an investment and trying to buy the right color. The right color is the color you like when you like it. This has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We're on, I believe, episode, I think this is episode 30, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a great journey. I know. Oh, I can't count. 1, 2 people. Well, it's because we have like 3 or 4 like pilot episodes that will never be released. They're non-released.
I wasn't part of them.
Maybe one day when I die, in my will, I'll say you can finally release them. But they're kind of like they're kind of like internet histories. Like, you just don't need to see those. You just don't need to talk about those. They're just out in the, they're not in the ether. They're just locked away somewhere on a hard drive. Just burn it. Just burn them.
The Disney Vault.
And it's really not because they're like bad like talking about anything bad. It's just that they're horrible quality. So, but this, I mean, I was super excited to dig into this stuff and learn a little bit more about the practices. I really think a paint that has a story like that structural blue just means so much more than it's gray with a flake of silver in it. And this could also go with custom colors. Like people do those pearlescent color changing, like chameleon colors. Like, that's cool. Like, if you like that, all the more power to you. And like you said, Mike, at the end, if you want to go with that, but you don't want to do a whole car respray, get it wrapped. A lot of those wraps can emulate, certain colors and certain things a lot better than paint can for cheaper. Or you're going to have to go spend 15 years developing the color that you like, and then another 12 to 17 different processes to adhere it to the car, like Lexus did. So props to you, Lexus. So this has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast. Guys, thanks again for joining us. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep driving. Keep driving.